How's it going, everybody? This is the Uncanny Omar from Near Mint Condition, the home of collected editions. And today I have the pleasure of talking to one of my favorite writers, Greg Pak. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Omar.
Absolutely. I have been wanting to talk to you for years, and I just told you right before we jumped on the live that I try to find you at one of the conventions where you were. Must have been lunch break or bathroom break. Something must have happened. I didn't get a chance to come and say hello, but I've been a big fan of your work. You know, you got a lot of my friends into the Incredible Hulk with Planet Hulk. I told you I was a big fan of the Phoenix End Song. I love that story. I thought it was a beautiful tribute.
Oh, thanks so much. Well, you got uncanny in your username here, so I gather you were a prime target for that particular story.
Yeah. But you know, and recently you are now writing the Lilo and Stitch comic.
Yes.
So you've got range, man. You've got kid stuff. You've got really powerful, impactful stuff, and things that'll make you cry, things that make you go, man, that was badass. So tell me a little bit about yourself. Like, where did your love of comics come from, and how did you know you wanted to do something in comics?
Yeah, well, I grew up in Dallas in the 70s and 80s. I'm Gen X, and I had my mom was awesome for many reasons, but one of them was that she hated coloring books. She only bought us paper and crayons and markers and paints and stuff. So I was drawing from the time as long as I can remember, you know. So I've got like little comics that I made when I was 6 or 7. So that was, just the idea that I should be and could be drawing and telling stories and creating stuff was sort of ingrained in me from the very beginning, since, from basically as long as I can remember. And also just a love of reading and everything else. I kind of thought I was going to be a writer from the time I was about 9 or 10.
Wow.
Yeah, I know, it's kind of wild. And then and I did all kinds of stuff as a kid and in high school that was all around that. I wrote short stories constantly. I wrote poetry. I did journalism. I did high school journalism. I wrote one-act plays. I was a theater kid in high school. I did black and white photography. And I was drawing cartoons for the school paper. So basically anything that had anything to do with storytelling or art or storytelling, I was all over. And then I went to college and I studied political science, and because I was always, interested in that as well. And at some point along the line, without even being really conscious about it, I stopped thinking about being a writer as a profession, even though I was still in college writing short stories, submitting to literary magazines, and I was doing improv comedy with an improv comedy group. So all of these things I was still doing. But I didn't let myself think about doing it professionally. I went home to Texas. I worked for Ann Richards when she was running for governor of Texas back in 1990. Worked in her office after she got elected. And then I got a scholarship to go to Oxford to study history, ostensibly to be a better politician eventually down the line.
Okay.
Right. But when I was at Oxford, I got the chance for the first time to make films. I got involved with the student filmmaking group and I made some short films, and all the lights went on. And I was like, I do need to be doing this creative work. That is where my heart and soul lie. And I went from Oxford to NYU, and I went to the NYU grad film program, made a bunch of short films, and made a feature film called Robot Stories eventually. And then actually, wildly enough, I just realized today is the 20th anniversary of Robot Stories debuting in theaters. We did a indie theatrical run, and 20 years ago today, that movie started in theaters, which is actually pretty close to the time that I had my first meeting with Marvel.
How did that come about?
So
by the way, before we get there, you've worn a lot of hats.
Yes.
By a really young age. By the time you were like in your early 20s, you've done a lot.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because it seems a little herky-jerky and all over the place, but it all makes sense. Part of the reason why I think is because if you're going to be a writer, literally anything you do is useful. You know what I mean? Anything you study, any book you read, any job you take, any experience you have, becomes part of, your lived experience, and it broadens you as a storyteller. You have more experience to draw on, and also just more, information. So like, I studied political science, I studied history, and I've always been obsessed with like natural history and animals and all that kind of stuff. And like, for example, when it came time to sit down and write Planet Hulk, I had to create a whole world. And part of creating that whole world the Hulk gets exiled to was like figuring out this sounds excessive, but it's all true. I had to figure out the planet's religion, like the religions on the planet, the different species, the zoology and the history and the sort of like the political, the whole political organization of this empire that the Hulk was going to be disrupting, and all of that. So basically everything I ever studied, everything I was ever interested in, eventually pays off in those kinds of ways. So it all makes sense, as roundabout as it all seems.
I really want to come back to what you just said about world building, because I think that's why a lot of us enjoy it. But I interrupted when you were talking about your meeting with Marvel. How did
so I got I had this award-winning indie film, and I got I had an agent, and my agent found out that Marvel was possibly looking for new writers, and kind of looking around, and I guess somebody at Marvel knew one of the agents at the agency I was at, and asked if they had anybody who was interested or interesting and interested, I suppose. And I had, it is this total serendipity thing, because I had made this movie called Robot Stories, which was an anthology picture, meaning it was a bunch of short stories. It was 4 shorts, and they were all tied together thematically, but they were about love, death, family, and robots, basically. Like each one was a little sort of small, self-contained 20-minute long story with families and couples struggling with the kinds of things families and couples struggle with, but each one had a little crazy robot twist. Like in the first story, there's a couple that want to adopt a baby, but before they're allowed to adopt a human baby, they have to show they're good parents by taking care of a robot baby. So that kind of, it was that kind of thing. So this was a terrible calling card to do more feature films, because it wasn't a traditional feature film. It was, it was a bunch of short stories, and hardly any anthology films are made. And so, usually people want to, like the people who are throwing money at you want to see a single story as a feature film as your calling card. But it turned out to be an amazing calling card for comics, to make that transition, because it showed that I could tell a contained short story that in a 20-minute film is sort of roughly analogous to a 20 or 22 page comic book. And and each one of these stories also kind of did that thing. I mean, they weren't superhero stories, but they were genre stories that really focused on human experience. And Marvel had always had the sort of, like the big selling point of Marvel from the point Marvel became Marvel was that it's neurotic superheroes. It's like these it's like everyday relationship and emotional struggles, relationship issues and emotional struggles. Like that was going to be the core of this storytelling, and pairing that with this big genre hijinks is what's so compelling and fun. So anyway, it turned into a great calling card. I got meetings with various editors and talked about stuff, and it seemed amazing. I mean, it was kind of going full circle, because I'd started off as a kid, writing, drawing comics, and
were you also a fan of reading comics as a kid?
Oh yeah. I mean, I read tons of comics as a kid. I mean,
you said you were a reader, so I assumed you read.
Yeah. I mean, it was a while before we got a comic shop nearby, and so I had that experience of buying, like in the Target, they would sell a 3-pack of comics, like 35 comics in 3-packs, and plastic bag 3-packs for 99 cents or whatever. And so we grab all those, but they were just random single issues, and so you'd have whatever issue of Defenders, then you might get lucky and get another issue of Defenders, but it would be like 5 issues away. So it was very hard to follow storylines that way, but it was still like, it was a trip. I mean, and then we got a comic book shop within biking distance, and it was pretty awesome. So I read comics, from the time I was a kid through up until beginning of high school or so. And I was still reading comics throughout, but I stopped reading a lot of superhero comics. I was mostly reading stuff like Usagi Yojimbo and Love and Rockets in high school, and indie comics and stuff. And then, but then in college, I got sucked back into superhero comics because of Dark Knight Returns and Batman Year One, stuff like that. So,
I will do it.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And
I will do
anyway,
it.
so I mean, I was not like, and by the time, and I was still reading all kinds of comics, up until, at the time that I first got that meeting, but I wasn't reading monthly comics on a regular basis. I wasn't reading, like mostly I was buying collections, and I was reading a lot of manga, still reading a lot of indie comics and stuff. But I mean, so I wasn't necessarily up on exactly what was happening in day to day, in week to week superhero comics at the time. But folks were really kind and sort of, like worked with me. And I mean, I had a kind of a wild experience, because for about a year I was writing scripts that people loved, but couldn't get produced for one reason or another.
Okay.
And then finally I wrote, you've got the logo in the background there. I did the Warlock series, which was a sort of a revamp, a new take on Warlock, drawn by Charlie Adlard. And that was back when Charlie Adlard was drawing both Warlock and Walking Dead.
Walking Dead. He's quick.
I know, it was wild. He was doing those at the same time. And so Warlock was a short-lived series. It was only 4 issues. Okay.
I gotta stop you, Greg. Did you pick Warlock, or did an editor go, you know what you'd be a good fit for?
They offered it because they were like, hey, you did this movie called Robot Stories, which is, you did all this stuff about like, like basic artificial intelligence and Warlock is basically an artificial human, like he's not literally a robot, but he's been created, in a lab, and maybe, that would be of interest. I was like, that sounds awesome. So I mean, I think in the beginning they thought of me as like, oh, he's the sci-fi guy, and Warlock's, it's kind of a sci-fi book or a sci-fi storyline. I mean, we kind of went back to the roots, the very early Warlock stories, sort of pre-Jim Starlin, were much more sci-fi, and then spectacularly it became sort of Marvel Cosmic, which is a whole nother creature. You know what I mean? Like, it's the trippy Marvel Cosmic thing is another sort of thing altogether.
It was a Jesus Christ Superstar.
Yeah, no,
it was very interesting,
which is awesome. Yeah, I mean, it shows you how little I kind of knew how green I was. I mean, I'm very proud of that book. I think storytelling.
Very ironic word to choose. Green.
Oh yeah. Why? Hold it. Why? Oh yes, right. Because I didn't really understand how comics were marketed and how I didn't understand reader expectations, monthly reader expectations.
Okay.
And so Warlock was kind of, and also we were kind of doing this thing almost like an Ultimates book, where it was sort of like its own continuity,
little pocket universe.
Yeah. And so like I mean, and so there were some throwaway lines in there where like people just, joking around, like knew about, talking about Spider-Man's secret identity or something like that. You know what I mean? And as if Spider-Man's just a pop culture thing as opposed to an actual thing. You know what I mean? So people, and I thought, whatever, like I didn't know. And, but people were like, well, wait a minute, is this 616? Where does this fall? And I was like, what's 616? You know what I mean? Like I was that clueless about that kind of stuff. So by the end of the series, we showed how it tied into the original Warlock mythos and all of that kind of stuff, and it was pretty sweet. But I think knowing what I know now, we would have dropped much bigger hints earlier on of what the deal was. But anyway, it was one of those books that if you got the kind of numbers Warlock got then today, it would people would be extremely happy. But books, I think the number of books that you needed to sell back then were a little higher, and so it just got 4 issues. But then shortly after that, I got tapped for the Phoenix Endsong book. It was kind of I was very lucky because I was living in New York City, and I got to and so I still live in New York City, but Marvel's offices are in New York, and I would go in to meet with the editors, and and so I got to meet a lot of people, and I'd have that kind of thing where I'd be in there, and somebody would be like, "Oh, hey, Greg, can you come here for a minute?" And it would be a different editor than the one I was working with, and they'd be like, "We're doing this thing. Do you think this might be up your alley?" And I got like multiple gigs early on that way, just because I was like around, and
you were in the office.
Exactly, because I was there meeting somebody else, and then I got to. I mean, it was a huge,
That's hilarious. A lot of the big names in the industry, a lot of the editors, editor in chiefs, that's kind of how they got their gig. They were persistent when it came to Marvel. Not you were. I'm not saying you were, but just hanging around the office, asking to do, little things around the office. And then eventually one of the big editors, mainly Roy Thomas, would be like, "Hey, get that kid. Can you write?"
There's something, like years ago when I was in film school, I'd had films on the film circuit, short films going out to film festivals. And I didn't have a lot of money. I couldn't afford to go to, I could barely afford to go to many of these film festivals. But I went to the ones that I could, particularly if they were nearby. And my feeling always was, if I show up in person, there's a chance something could happen. If I don't show up, nothing's going to happen. If I'm not there, it's just gonna, people, the film will screen, people might like it, but I'm not there. And so if there's anybody there who might want to, do something or I mean, it's not going to happen. So, but if I show up, there's a chance. And so, so showing up, I mean, even if you don't realize you're showing up, I'm just going to a meeting, but I'm showing up, and also, I mean, that's also paired with having scripts that internally people are liking, regardless of the sales at that time. People liked what I was doing, and also I was reliable. You know what I mean? I was turning in stuff on time, and so it was nice. I mean, I was very fortunate, and there were a lot of people who just kind of gave me a shot. I mean, because when I started, oh wow, I'm writing for Marvel, but I had no idea if I had an actual career. You know what I mean? Like I just have this one gig. I'm writing these four issues of War. Well, I'm writing this Warlock book, and then it gets canceled. Like by the time I've written issue 2, we already know it's going to be canceled by 4. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, okay, well, I'm just going to make the best of it, and
So then you went on to do Phoenix.
Yeah,
that was a lot different. That felt like okay. So you described this Warlock like being a part of like a pocket continuity. You don't need to have read anything beforehand to enjoy it. Whereas I felt like Phoenix Endsong was the bookend to the Grant Morrison New X-Men, because in the pages of New X-Men, they had killed off the character of Jean Grey.
Yep. And it was not only that, but it was also, like a big callback to the, the most classic X-Men story of all, the Dark Phoenix saga, under Claremont, right? So that was a big deal. And
you hit it. You did it.
Well, I appreciate it.
Did you prep for that one a little bit different? Did you?
Yeah, well, yeah, I read and read and read. I mean, I had read all the books for Warlock too. You know what I mean? But with Phoenix, I was
X-Men fans get to be a little they can be a little loud and obnoxious if you don't get it right.
Well, I knew, I knew that it was, it was high stakes. Well, also because, I grew up reading the Warlock stuff, but I also grew up reading that Phoenix stuff, and also I knew how huge all of that Phoenix stuff was. I mean, I was there when it was coming out. I went and bought my 2 copies of Uncanny 137. You know what I mean? I've still got them in Mylar bag somewhere.
You're gonna get rich.
Yeah, exactly. Right. I wonder what those are worth these days. But
not what Toys R Us was giving away on the cover. I can guarantee you that.
Oh right, yeah, right. That's like the 25,000 or whatever that was on the cover. Hilarious. Yeah, you're remarkably well preserved to have such a seemingly first person memory of all of this, Omar.
Oh, I forget, like, to pick up my kids from school, but when it comes to comics,
I'm just saying, you got a lot less gray in your beard, so well done.
oh, I just hide it. I hide it. It's all under here. Like, I, I'm very lucky that the hair is coming in like that. And the gray started back there for some reason.
That's
Um,
hilarious.
but
But
thank you.
yeah, so I mean, yeah, so definitely the stakes felt, the stakes were huge.
Mhm.
I mean, when I got that gig, when I got the call that they, that I've been picked for that, I mean, it was one of the, it's like the movie scene. I was literally jumping down, in my office after I hung up the phone. It was like, yeah, it felt momentous. You know what I mean? Okay, I'm writing a kind of a sequel to the most classic X-Men story I could even think of. Like that was like, okay. And then that book, like that tied into the Whedon Cassidy Astonishing book, which
Mhm.
was the biggest thing in comics at the time, and Greg Land was drawing, and Greg Land's art sort of felt of a piece with that, and so people who were digging that uncanny, I mean that astonishing book, really glommed onto this book, and we really leaned into all the emotion of everything. I mean, it was kind of up my alley, just as like a big, again, a big sci-fi fantasy story, but with a huge emotional core to it. So I got to dig into all that, and that book ended up, like, the first issue I still remember was like number 3 on the charts that month, which I don't think anybody was really expecting. And so suddenly it was like, oh, maybe I actually have a career now. You know what I mean? Like this actually feels like it can keep on going, and it
Mhm.
did. And so 20 years later, I'm still doing this. 20 years and almost. I think it's past 600 comics. I think I've written 600, at least 600 individual comic books by now.
That's a lot. That's a lot of comic books.
It kind of is. It's a little mind blowing.
And it's amazing to think of that little kid that was drawing, creating his own comics, and now you've actually written for not just Marvel, but DC, Boom, and Dynamite,
Yep.
and all these different studios. It's great. I love seeing stories like that. Somebody coming from a place of love as a young kid, then growing up and eventually making it in the comics industry, because it's not easy. You can write one good story and then one bad story, and the fans will just turn on you. It takes a while to build momentum, but when they saw, or at least for me, when I had read, I remember your name in Morlock, and I'm like, oh, it's the guy that did Warlock. Cool, he's writing this Phoenix End song. Let's see how much he knows about X-Men, though. And you knocked it out of the park. I loved
Oh,
it. I was like, oh my gosh, this was so good. It was such a good send off. And then when you got to write Planet Hulk, I thought, oh, that's awesome, because we got teased a little bit about Peter David coming back. He did a few issues right before you had started, and then Daniel Way
yep.
wrote some stories, and then you came in. And I thought what you did with the character was tremendous, right? Like
Oh,
there's been a lot of things that both Bill Mantlo and Peter David and Bruce Jones have done differently, but worked on the character's psyche and like worked on his just multiple levels. But I think what you did was so welcoming to new readers, because you took Bruce out of his, I don't know, I don't even know why the hell I'm telling you this. You know what you did. You took him out of his, almost felt like an awesome Twilight Zone episode. It was so freaking amazing. You just took him out of his element. You put him on a different planet where he could just smash everything, and you built this world. So I wanted to go back to what you were saying earlier, because I think why a lot of us love that story so much is not only did you have these iconic scenes with like Hulk versus Silver Surfer as a gladiator, or Hulk becoming this world breaker, but you built this world and you built these characters, and a lot of us ended up caring for these characters so much so that I kind of miss a lot of these characters
oh,
when they don't show up. It's nice to see them show up from time to time. Um, and man, I absolutely love that book. That was such
thank
a
you.
good book. So how did you approach that? You said you were doing you were working on the religion, the politics of this
Yep.
world before you even wrote like your first page. Is that how you had done it?
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, I did a lot. I did outlines and pitch documents and all of that kind of stuff. Mark Paniccia was my editor on that. He and Nate Cosby, and Mark and I would get together a lot. We go to this pizza joint, this dingy little pizza joint, and sit in the back and go over stuff and just cackle because it was so much fun. It was like, it was incredibly fun doing that. And it was just that, you know, for a big chunk of that, it was just the two of us, kind of like, you know, I was bouncing ideas off him and he was giving me feedback and all of that. I mean, so we had started off, like, the mandate I got was, okay, Hulk on an alien planet, Gladiator. You know, it's a Gladiator story, Hulk on an alien. I was like,
Okay.
fantastic. And you know, with that, oh, and Joe Quesada had an idea that he would be betrayed by one of his people, and that and he had a name in mind for that the character should be called Meek, you know,
Oh, okay.
the meek shall inherit kind of thing. So I think that's as much as they gave me, really. And so, you know, it was, again, all right up my alley. This is fun, big genre stuff. And then I sat and thought about it, and like, what's the emotional hook here? And what I ended up writing on a card and sticking onto my computer was monster to hero. You know, it's somebody who's hated and reviled on Earth, thought of as a monster, and then sent to a place where all the things that are seen as vices, all those things that make him dangerous and hated on Earth, actually are things that this planet needs, and they become virtues. Like his anger is seen as righteous anger, you know what I mean, instead of just out of control anger. And and he learns how to bond with others and be responsible and ultimately become a hero. That's the storyline here. So then in all the world building, I always had that in mind. You know what I mean? So the world building is all in service of that story. And I think that's what made it work, because I think we've all, I think every writer who's ever worked on something has found themselves sometimes spending way too much time. Sorry, I just dropped something. Way too much time fiddling around with just getting into the intricacies of some of the world building that doesn't really matter. You know what I mean? Like people, I mean, this is sort of like a joke, but people can spend ridiculous amounts of time debating like how the magic system works. And you know what? Sometimes magic is just magic. You know what I mean? Like sometimes you don't have to overthink it.
I love those arguments.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, they're fun, but
Yeah.
in terms of like telling the story, it's like the story is about, you know, the story, Lord of the Rings, the story is about the cost of bearing this ring to the, you know what I mean? The cost of this journey and this responsibility and what it takes from all of these different characters to fulfill this terrible task. It's, you know, and all the other stuff, like all the world building should like feeds that, you know what I mean? And so when I was developing like the political system, it was like, okay, so I need a political system that's basically evil, you know what I mean? Something that, you know, like a authoritarian monarchy, you know, it's an empire that it's because the Hulk's gonna overthrow it, you know what I mean? Like that. So building things up that way, and like the divisions between the different species on the planet. It's like there's ingrained racism on this planet that he's gonna break apart. You know what I mean? He's considered to be a monster, and so all the other gladiators or monsters from different are also considered to be monsters. But then they're gonna bond together, and you know, so the storyline is that, like, you know, like just because somebody calls you a monster doesn't mean you're a monster, and that everyone, yeah, I mean, just like, so but all of those different elements are all feeding this same, you know, and then the religion stuff, all the stuff about the prophecy of the world breaker, you know, and the, like, their dual prophecies of the world breaker and the Sakar son. The world breaker will destroy everything, with the Sakar son who will save us all. And like that again is reflecting this thing, like with the Hulk, how much is too much? Like at what point, like, is this righteous anger feels like it's necessary, but then there's always a price for anger. You know what I mean? So all of this stuff feeds the themes. All of that world building fed the different themes that the story was working on, and the Hulk's big emotional journey. So that was kind of how we kept it all, you know, because otherwise you can just do anything and lose track. You know what I mean?
So, okay, well, let me ask you this: since you worked so hard on that, like building this world, and it's a character that is owned by Marvel Comics, then how did you know how long it was going to go? Like,
Oh, well, that's a publishing thing, right? Because
Mhm.
they from the beginning they were like, okay, you got 8 issues, and then we're going to
So they
do
gave you
this.
8 issues. Okay.
Yes, and then at a certain point, you know, like I think the outline came back and they're like, this is they really liked it, and then also with publishing they were like, oh, okay, well, now we've got this big planned event, the Civil War event that's
Okay.
happening in the middle of all this. And you know what? We don't want the Hulk on Earth during Civil War because if the Hulk picks one side or the other, that side's going
Yeah.
to win. So, so they were like, why don't you just keep the Hulk out in space for, I don't know, another half a year? So we ended up with 14 issues, you know, and
That's
which,
how it was done. That's
yeah,
awesome. Okay.
yeah, which is fantastic. You know, I mean, if we'd had to do an 8 issues, we would have done it at 8 issues, 8 issues, but we had getting 14 issues was amazing. You know what I mean? And the story really got to be what it really wanted to be. So
So
it was fantastic.
once the story was over, once Planet Hulk was done, when did you find out, or was it your idea to say, okay, now Hulk needs to come to Earth and kick some ass?
So
Or was it the editor that said, well, now let's bring him back and there's going
there,
to be a big event?
there were a series of creative summits around that time, and which I was going to,
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I mean, what goes up must come down. And we always knew the Hulk was going to come back, and he was going to be mad, and he was going to smash the people who sent him out there, right? Like that
Mhm.
was kind of baked into the thing from the beginning. The question was like, where and when, you know? And so for a while, there was a thought of like, oh, he should arrive in the middle of Civil War, and then it was, but then they were like, well, I mean, it just felt like too much, and so ultimately, it was like Civil War will end, then the Hulk will return, and then we'll do another event. You know what I mean? Like the next year after Civil War, there'll be a big event, and that's what became World War Hulk.
That's awesome. I love that. And you were a part of the summit, and I mean, it was huge. That storyline was huge. Um, and then of course, once that was over, not to spoil things for people that haven't read it, but we ended up getting Jeff Lubb coming in and writing the Hulk book. You stuck around to write the Incredible Hercules with Fred Van Lente, and then Incredible Hulks,
Yep,
which
and
was
and I was and I also wrote the Scar Son of Hulk book, which came out
oh
at the same
yeah,
time. Yeah, so
Scar, and then there was a whole thing. There was an event that you did too, Chaos War,
yep.
during that particular time too. And I know that you've got two Omnis. You've got Planet Hulk and you've got World War Hulk, and it's amazing to see your name on there. But I would love for Marvel to finish out your run on Hulk with, I'd say probably two more Omnis would do it,
Well, hopefully someday we'll see.
including the crossovers. So I mentioned earlier you've got range. So we just went through all that emotional turmoil and oh my gosh, that scene where the bomb goes off and the mother's holding the child, and oh, that was, man, that was rough.
Oh,
Must have
thanks.
been rough to write. Um, so let's talk about something happy then. Tell me about Lilo and Stitch.
Yes.
How did this come about? There,
So yeah.
Dynamite.
Sorry, go on.
No, it was It's published by Dynamite. Came out in January, the first issue. So tell me about this
So
project.
Nate Cosby, who I mentioned before, he was one of the editors on all the Hulk books I did and all
Mhm.
the Hercules books I did too. And I just have kept in touch with Nate over the years. Worked with him on a bunch of things. He's been on he's done a lot of books for Dynamite, and so and from time to time he'll give me a call and say, "Hey, Greg, what do you think about X, Y, or Z?" So I did a Bond book with him, and now I'm doing this Lilo and Stitch book. So it's a story that picks up right after the movie,
Okay.
and it's drawn by the brilliant Julia Giacomino, who is an Italian artist who's just astounding. Like the art is just like sort of movie perfect. It's spot on, and but it's got all of the dynamism and expression that you could ever want, which is an accomplishment because you know if you have to draw something to another person's design or whatever, like you know a lesser artist could be a little stiff, but it's so punchy and fun. And It's got letters by Jeff Eckelberry and cultural consulting and develop by Moana McAdams. an amazing Native Hawaiian children's book author, and because I'm Asian American, but I'm not Native Hawaiian at all, and so I felt like I had a good grasp on the characters and everything, but we wanted to make the details sing. You know what I mean? We wanted to get it right, and so it's been amazing working with Moana, because these are Native American characters, and that's a big part of the whole ethos of the story is really built that way, from the movie on. That's been a big part of it. Ohana, you know what I mean? Like the whole theme of family and everything. So it's been a blast. It's a ton of fun, and it's out. The first issue came out January 31st. You can ask your local comic shop if you want a signed copy of it. Please go to the gregpakshop.com, gregpakshop.com, and you can buy a signed copy, and it'll be mailed to your doorstep.
All right, now tell me the process of writing this particular story. Compared to something like you did, like Planet Hulk, or even Batman, Superman, or even your own creator-owned stuff. How is it different writing this? Like, I assume you watched Lilo and Stitch, you loved it, and you were like, yeah, I want to write this. This is going to be fun. Do you put music on in the background to inspire you?
Sometimes, not with Lilo and Stitch, I didn't. Sometimes when I'm writing the Darth Vader comics, I will definitely play Star Wars soundtracks in the background.
Awesome.
There's sometimes, movie soundtracks are pretty good for writing comics. I've listened to, if you look at my iTunes stats, I think one of the most, in fact, I'll bring it up right now. One of the most listened to things I own is the soundtrack for Prince Mononoke, which is just astounding. And
oh my gosh,
a really great soundtrack to listen to if you are writing sort of genre adventure stuff, particularly fantasy like stuff.
Okay.
It's kind of funny. Yeah, in fact, almost all of my top, that's that Princess Mononoke soundtrack is like half of my top 50. It's like
all those Studio Ghibli soundtracks are beautiful.
And then a bunch of Jonathan Coulton songs, because I wrote comics based on Jonathan Coulton songs as well. So and then it gets into random stuff. Stevie Wonder, Donovan, Ray Charles.
So do you have to play music with like scores?
Yes, but no. Well, not always. If I know it, if I know a song well enough, and it can kind of just blend in the background, and I don't really think about the words. But scores are good. Scores are good for writing too. Sometimes I can't stand to have anything playing at all. But with Lilo and Stitch, I love the movie. Love the movie when it came out. It's my favorite of all the modern Disney movies, animated movies. So when it was offered to me, I was like, this sounds incredible. I just want to be sure that we get support from a Native Hawaiian cultural consultant, so I don't screw it up. You know what I mean? And we did. Moana's been fantastic, and the book is, people seem to dig it. But yeah, how do I approach it was your question. It's all the same, like no matter what I'm writing, I'm just trying to figure out what the big fun genre plot hook is, and then what the real emotional story is. I need both of those. I'm always trying to do something a little different with that plot. You want to find something surprising and fun, and then something additive in terms of the emotional story. Something that hasn't necessarily been done before quite that way. One of the fun things with Lilo and Stitch is that, so we're picking. I don't know how well you remember the movie or whatever, but it's you got.
I remember it. I've got two little girls, and I actually like the movie.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
They were born, so I force these things on my kids to watch with me. So.
Yeah. So you got this kid, this little girl on Kauai in Hawaii, whose parents have died, and that's sort of alluded to in the background. And she's living with her older sister, and she's kind of a mess. She has very little impulse control. She's clearly got, stuff going on. She's very incredibly smart and funny, but she's real quirky, and other kids tease her, and then she gets in fights with other kids and all this kind of stuff. She's just got a lot of, she's got issues. She doesn't quite fit in. And then on the other hand, you got this alien who's actually built to destroy. He's like this
Yeah.
genetically created little monster who's literally built for destruction. And he was being sent off for exile, and he escaped and ended up landing on Earth. And so it's these two, little bundles of destruction who end up bonding with each other and kind of learning to care for each other and kind of saving each other in a way, and then also finding family with each other on this, with this kind of motley group of supporting characters. So that kind of gets played through in the movie in a fantastic way, but they're sort of at this point where they're like, yeah, we're still kind of screwed up, but we're a family. You know what I mean? And so in taking the next step, we got to find a story. The challenge was to find a story that wasn't just going to repeat the beats of the movie. You know what I mean? So it's not going to be Stitch out of control again and that kind of thing. It has to kind of take the next step emotionally, right? Like, you don't just want to like rehash the same crisis of the two of them in conflict and then finding each other again. And I mean, always you're going to end up having some kind of conflict, right? But it needs to take that next emotional step. And so the next emotional step was not that Stitch was out of control, but that he realizes that because of these alien robots who are coming to try to hunt him down, if he's around Lilo, he puts her in danger. So he feels like he has to leave this family and leave her, even though that's where he belongs, that's who he wants to be with, in order to keep her safe. And meanwhile, Lilo, of course, is like, but you're part of the family, and we're responsible for you too. You know what I mean? And so we introduced this new idea, not new to the world, but new to these books, of kuleana, which is a Native Hawaiian term. The sort of simplest translation, which is not complete, is responsibility. So people have a responsibility to each other, to their family, to their community, to the environment, to take care of the environment as well. And that's kind of that's sort of the overarching theme here, is like these Lilo and Stitch are learning, sort of taking the next level of what it means to be a member of this family and to have this responsibility to take care of each other, and how taking care of each other, what that means in a more complex situation. So that's the big sort of like emotional side of it. And then the other side is figuring out like fun stuff you can do. Like we got robots who are coming after Stitch in order to steal his DNA so they can learn how to be more destructive, because they're very mild-mannered robots who are resentful of the Galactic Federation. They want to take over the Galactic Federation, but they're not tough enough, so they need to get Stitch's DNA so they can be more destructive. Like that's the gag. But one of the reasons I picked robots is because we want to have big action, but we don't want to have, it's a kid's book, right? So I mean, it's a book that anybody can read and enjoy, but it's got to be kid friendly, and so we're not, we're not decapitating zombies or you know what I mean? Like, I mean, you could probably get away with zombies in a kid's book, but
they're already dead.
Like if you do it a certain way. Yeah. But you know what I'm saying? It's like, you got to kind of pick your, so you're making certain choices that are going to be fun, but also fit the audience and fit the, like there's, you've got a playground in which you're playing, so you want to take it as far as you can, but not burn down the playground.
For this book, for this series, were you giving a like certain amount of issues to write? Is it a mini series? Is it an ongoing series?
We have a certain number of issues in mind, which I don't think I'm authorized to reveal. But the first storyline is 4 issues, and we got plans for more. So
good.
Hopefully we'll keep going as long as people are buying. But
that's what I wanted to hear.
Yeah,
that's what I wanted to hear. And I always ask writers this particular question. When you go back, and by the way, we got a lot of comments in the chat right now, praising your work, and just anywhere, not just for Hulk, which of course people love, but also Lilo and Stitch. I'll show you here in a second. But do you ever go back and look at the things that you have written in the past and think to yourself, man, that artist really made my story shine?
Oh yeah,
or
all the time.
I wish I could have changed something about it.
Yeah, it is kind of funny. I don't tend to reread my stuff that much. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Like every once in a while I need to, because I'm doing a new storyline and all of that. That taps back into that. But mostly I'm too busy. I got too much to do. So I'm not. Yeah, I haven't gone back and reread a lot of stuff recently anyway. But absolutely. Like I work with Tak Miyazaki all the time, and Tak is just like he's the artist behind Mech Cadet U, which was a boom book that ended up getting picked up by Netflix and turned into an animated show called Mech Cadets. And Tak and I also worked on these kids books called The Princess Who Saved Herself, Princess Who Saved Her Friends, that are based on a Jonathan Colton
My
song.
daughter loved that series, The Princess
Oh,
Who
oh,
Saved
thank
Herself.
you, thanks.
Yeah,
Tak and I also co-created Amadeus Cho, who's
I know that guy.
yeah, exactly. Who we introduced way back when, and who eventually became the totally awesome Hulk. And he was also buddies with Hercules, and co-starred in that Hercules book for 4.5 years. So
Then
yeah,
had
so Tak and I go
his own
way.
book for a while.
Yes, yeah, yeah,
25 issues.
yeah. So Tak and I go way back, and but whenever Tak draws something, it's like he just brings something to it that I couldn't have asked for. I wouldn't even known how to ask for it. But and he makes it live. You know what I mean? He makes those characters live and breathe. The artists are doing all of the acting. You know what I mean? Like I can write the lines, and I can try to make them as subtle and as multifaceted and whatever, as funny or whatever. But like the artists, like you got to have an artist who has that kind of sensitivity and who gets it, who knows when to deadpan something, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
also or who knows when to go big, you know what I mean? Like and who has that also with the emotional moments, like who was it? Oh yeah, on City Boy.
Mhm.
Um the artist on City Boy who did this kind of amazing thing where
Like Cameron.
yeah, well, yeah. The character's name is Cameron, and
Mhm.
and the um, and it's a very emotional story because the kid is so he's a kid who is able to tap into the city and manipulate it, like see everything the city knows and manipulate the infrastructure and all this kind of stuff. But fundamentally, it's a story about a kid who is abused by his mother, who later abandoned him and then disappeared. And so he's got, like he has a lot of sort of trauma that he's grappling with, and he still wants to find his mother and all this kind of stuff. But he's pretty, he's really distraught, and he cries at just about every issue at some point. And Minkyu Jung is the artist, and there was a point when it's like Cameron's, like in the script, it's like Cameron's crying, and Minkyu just drew him with his head tilted down and the brim of his cap. He's always wearing this kind of baseball cap, and the brim of his
Mhm.
cap is just down like that, and it's kind of covering his eyes, and it totally worked. You know what I mean? It's like sometimes hiding is more effective than showing it all. You know what I mean? And so having artists who can bring that kind of nuance, solid gold. Also artists who can I love it when I get an artist. I mean, and different artists are just right for different kinds of projects too, right? You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like you can't imagine a better artist for World War Hulk than John Romita Jr. You know what I mean? Doing that massive sort of classic mighty Marvel slugfest. I mean, there's so much power in every one of those images. It's just astounding. And then you look at what Tak did with Amadeus Cho, his initial character designs for Amadeus Cho. It's just like a kid in an army jacket and jeans on a Vespa, and he just like the from that initial character design, there was just so much character and energy and charisma popping off of that character, and he's just like in everyday clothes. So like getting an artist who could draw people in everyday clothes and make them still pop in a superhero book, that's amazing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like yeah. Anyway, so yes. So your question was, do I ever look at something? It's like, oh my god, that artist saved me. Yes, every single time.
What
Every
did they
single time.
saved? Just
Well, they just make it work. You know
help
what
me
I mean?
shine, if you will.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean
Help me
it.
shine.
I thought about this years ago when I was in film school and working in cinematography, and it's like, um, you can be the best cinematographer in the world, But if all you have to work with is a 10 by 10 white box of a room, because sometimes on a student film that's all you would get. You know what I mean? Like you just
Oh,
gotta
okay, yeah.
you're shooting an office scene, and it's just like this little box with white walls and no real set decoration. You're really struggling. You know what I mean? Like there's like you like having like it's all a package. You know what I mean? Great cinematography is of a piece with great set design and great and great art direction. You know what I mean? And great sets. Great location scouting gives you great cinematography. You know what I mean? And great scheduling, because then you're like you're shooting at the right time of day with the right kind of light. You know what I mean? Like all of those things go hand in hand. All this work is so collaborative. So my writing is mediocre if the art doesn't sing. If the you know what I mean? Like and when you've like great artists elevate everything.
Yeah.
So yes, I'm incredibly grateful to all the collaborators I work with, and I also feel like my responsibility is also to work to an artist's strengths. You know what I mean? And to try to like give people stuff that they're gonna knock out of the park to draw. You know what I mean? And be helpful in that way. So I
I
strive
try
for
to see that with Takeshi Miyazawa, like the stuff that you did.
Yeah, I mean, I think
Mech Cadet, that's what it was.
Mecha U is sort of right up his alley. I mean, I think Talk definitely has a much more complete history of giant robot designs in his head than I do. You know what I mean? Like I think he's more immersed in that whole world. I think he just ate that whole thing up. I mean, it was fantastic working with him. But yeah, but yeah, no, I definitely am, very grateful to all the artists I'm lucky enough to work with. I mean, I draw. I don't draw professionally. I mean, I do draw stuff from time to time that that's been published and all that.
You
But
do it in
I
your
do not. I don't have. I mean, one of the reasons I'm so grateful to the artists is also because I know enough to know how hard it is, and I know enough to know I can't do it. You know what I mean? I can't. Like every artist I work with can draw anything. I mean, it's astounding. If you're going to draw comics, you have to be able to draw literally anything, and I don't have that skill. I can draw a few kinds of things really well. I can draw sort of like cartoony expressions and sell a moment, sell a little joke. But I can't,
Oh,
you know what I mean? But I can't draw a cityscape and make it look. I can't draw Spider-Man swinging through a cityscape and have that, this incredible background of a city and all that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? Like there's so many, and that's just the barest. That's the barest mention of everything I can't draw. Anyway, but having some understanding of the process and knowing what it takes makes me even more appreciative.
I think it's interesting, like to look at different people's scripts. Like whenever you look at somebody like Brian Michael Bendis, who has drawn.
Yeah.
Then sometimes do you find yourself doing that sometimes in a script? Like, it's better if I just sketch it out. Like this is what I need.
I mean, I think I did that more early on from time to time.
Mhm.
I haven't had to do that much at all recently. Partly I also, I've apologized publicly to Charlie Adlard because like my early scripts in that Warlock book were just overwritten. You know what I mean? I was like being really precise about, panel arrangement, all this kind of stuff. And he dutifully did it all. But I don't need to be that. I mean, the people I'm working with are brilliant storytellers. I don't need to, I mean, I the stuff that I do nowadays is like I might say this is the biggest panel on the page, like this is the big the big moment, or I might say it's a new scene, like this. It would be great if this could start a new tier, new location on the I'll make those kind of suggestions, and I'll also say stuff like now we're looking over their shoulder at this or whatever. But I'm trying not to micromanage, and as a result, my
Yeah.
scripts, my panel descriptions tend to be a little shorter and more essential. Because you want to let them do their thing and be able to stretch and breathe.
Oh,
Sorry, I lost your what was your initial question? I rambled there and I lost your initial question.
No, it's okay. I was wondering about if you ever sketch out something.
Oh, right. So yes. So I don't.
You said you were an artist, and I was
Yeah.
wondering.
I mean,
If
every
you were
once in a
on script.
while, if I'm, I mean, like, I mean, and sometimes there's like language issues, you know what I mean? Because artists
Oh,
are
right. Yeah.
located all around the world. And so sometimes I'm like, oh, like there have been a couple of times when I've, done like little crude layouts of how, maybe this could work this way. I mean, but yeah, I try not to do that too much. I mean, every once in a while. And sometimes an artist will be like, can you just show me what you're talking about, because I'm trying to be respectful too, you know what I mean? And you don't
Yeah.
want to you don't want to spoon feed, or it's kind of like giving an actor a line reading, you know what I mean? Like some actors really hate that, like say it this way, and then some actors like, just tell me how you want to hear it and then I'll play with that,
Oh,
what I
so
mean?
everybody's a little bit different then.
Yeah, exactly, right. So you want to kind of feel that out. So
Gotcha. We got a couple comments here just thanking you.
aw,
Hello, gentlemen. Can't stay, but wanted to come and say hi, Mr. Pack. Thank Mr. Pack for one of the best Hulk stories.
thank you, Juso.
And thanks for the World Breaker Hulk.
World Breaker, thank you, Ryan.
James saying he loves your Incredible Hercules
Aw,
and everything with Amadeus Cho.
thank you, James. Yes. Oh, and I need to shout out to Fred Van Lente, who was my co-writer on all that Incredible Hercules stuff.
Oh, it was so good.
Thank you.
It was so fun. This is from Sato. Would you would love to read your version of Superman? Is he a character you ever wanted to write? You did some Superman.
Yes, I did. The answer is yes, Sato. It is a character I've wanted to write, and I have. I did a few years of Superman for I wrote Action Comics during the New 52. I started with issue 25 with Aaron Cooter. The amazing Aaron Cooter was the artist, and eventually became the co-writer of that book because we were working so tightly. Loved working on that book. If you want to dive into that, just go find that first volume. It started with Action Comics number 25 during the New 52.
Yeah.
I think it's Action Comics volume 5, What Lies Beneath, was that first trade, and I'm very proud of that one. So go get it, and I hope you enjoy it. I also wrote a Batman Superman book. That initial, Jay Lee was the initial artist who was the artist on that book. That was also a ton of fun.
So there you go. So, who's your favorite Hulk character? This is from Richard.
Oh, well, I mean, it's Bruce Banner. Like there's a handful of characters over the years who just kind of got under my skin and stayed there. And probably will be there forever. And that's included in that list are Bruce Banner, Clark Kent, Amadeus Cho, of course, Adama, Captain Adama or Admiral Adama from the Battlestar Galactica series. I did a Battlestar Galactica comic book, and for whatever reason, I don't know. I just feel like there's something about that. I just feel like that I just get that character, So Bruce Banner is just, I just have always loved that character. I mean, I had the incredible fortune of being able to co-create a whole bunch of characters in that Hulk mythos, and among the ones that I co-created with Carlo Pagulayan, I really love Korg, the big stone man. He was actually, I mean, he's one of the stone men who first fought Thor in Thor's very first appearance. But we gave him a name and a whole story and a backstory and all of that, so it feels like he's our baby. But that's probably one of my favorite of the ones I created.
What was it like for you to see that Planet Hulk sort of play out in the Thor Ragnarok movie?
Oh, it was incredible. I mean, it's a totally different vibe, right?
Yeah.
Because the Thor Ragnarok is basically a comedy. It's a buddy comedy. But I freaking love it. You know what I mean? Like, that's probably my favorite of the Marvel movies, right? I mean, it's a very different vibe from Planet Hulk, which is essentially, it's a planetary romance. It fits into that genre, but it's an epic story with really kind of, deep emotional. It's the Hulk's, ostensibly one of the Hulk's deepest emotional stories. So I know that there's a certain contingent of Hulk fans who are, who don't particularly like the Thor Ragnarok movie, but I gotta say I love the movie. I should also say that I hold out hope that someday we'll be able to do that we'll be able to do a sort of more straight adaptation of Planet Hulk, and hopefully they'll call me up and let me write it. I mean, it would be an amazing, hell, it would be amazing, like, multi-season prestige television show. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah. Oh my gosh. You have no idea how happy it makes me to hear you say that, because it deserves to be a big event. Like, no, I don't want a movie. It needs to be broken down into chapters to build these characters up.
I mean, I did that storyline. I mean, it's been incredible because that storyline's been a lot of different things. It was like they made an animated straight to DVD video movie of it, which is great. They did, and then I got to write a novelization of it, a prose novel, and then they made they made an audiobook of the prose novel. It just keeps going. I mean, so who knows what'll happen in the future. Fingers crossed. Krypton Ken
saying thanks for all the great comics over the years, especially your Hulk books.
Thank you
for all the work you've done. Planet Hulk will always be one of my all-time favorite Hulks.
Appreciate it, Richard.
Planet Hulk is iconic. It's brilliant.
Thank you, Joshua.
Planet Hulk is my favorite Hulk story of all time. All time. That's
all right.
You're up there with the greats. You're up there with the greats.
I appreciate it. Thank you. I mean, while we're talking about all this Planet Hulk stuff, I haven't shouted out Carlo Pagulayan and Aaron Lopresti, who are the lead artists on that book, and were just amazing.
They were great, and I mean the whole team just so good. Joshua is also saying that you deserve to be part of the Marvel Cosmic. That's how you do it. Hulk is too powerful for planet Earth. And I love that story. My favorite Hulk run so far. Kyra accepting and loving both Bruce and Hulk is one of my favorite comic book moments.
Yeah, it's thank you. I appreciate that. I loved writing that scene. There's a kind of a marriage ceremony scene. I kind of blew my mind. At some point somebody sent me a message over social media saying that they had used some of those lines in their actual wedding, I think. And it was like, what?
That's awesome.
It's wild.
I use some of Fabian Niciesa's lines from the wedding of Cyclops and Phoenix in mine.
Oh my gosh. Oh boy.
I get it. Hey, if it's romantic. Tyler Smith, my buddy Tyler, saying thanks for Hulk 611. Father and son story. Favorite Hulk story. Everything Cho. Cooking will break your heart. Vader. Just basically everything. Can't wait for what's next.
Thank you, Tyler. I really appreciate it. And thank you for giving a shout out to Cooking Will Break Your Heart. It's I wrote a cookbook memoir that came out, 2 years ago? And you can also get that at my store, gregpak.shop. I mean, gregpakshop.com. But yeah, no, I thank you very much. It's I'm actually really, really, really proud of that book. I think it's really good. So, and if you like Korean food, if you want to see what a Korean American Midwestern Texas palate is all about, go get it. And then also thanks for the shout out for Hulk 611. That's one of my favorite books that I've worked on too. It's we did this huge thing with Scar and the Hulk, and Scar, son of Hulk, abandoned on the planet Hulk didn't even know existed, and massive father-son issues. And there's a big moment in Hulk 611 that has resonated with a lot of people over the years. Paul Pelletier drew that issue, and there's a splash page there that's just totally heartbreaking, and was really grateful. So thank you. I'm glad it resonated with you. Thanks.
There's a couple of mentions here about Planet Hulk animated movie.
Yep.
And did you have any say in the Planet Hulk animated movie?
I got they pulled me on board as a consultant, and I got to read the script, and the big thing they wanted to know is how to pronounce all the aliens' names. So that was kind of fun. Yeah, no, I thought they did a really good job. I mean, they had to cram this massive 14 issue story into 82 minutes or 78 minutes or whatever it was, and they made some really cool choices. And I think they were not able to use the Silver Surfer for various reasons, and so they came up with a really great substitute who totally worked in the whole context of the thing.
Beta rebuild.
Yeah, you went spoiled it, but
no, it's on the cover.
Yeah. Oh, it's on the cover. Okay, then not a spoiler then. But no, it was fun. And then I don't remember who did it, but I thought the soundtrack of that was also great. I got to see
You're
that.
you're a fan of soundtracks. We need to talk a
I
little bit
am.
about that after we end this. So I'm also a fan of soundtracks. Well, this is a really, really good question because you mentioned earlier about going to school for this stuff and
Yeah.
having an eye for this stuff. Do you ever entertain the idea of directing an MCU movie?
I mean, I would not say no were it offered. I will say that. I think realistically, I need to. It's been. I mean, I always have some film or TV thing going on that I can't talk about because
Mhm.
you know, until it actually happens, I can't talk about it. I'll just say that, you know, like I made this movie Robot Stories back in the day, and it was incredibly well regarded, micro, you know, tiny budgeted indie movie. Um, uh, Probably to direct a to be considered to direct an MCU movie, I got to do something else in the interim that you know, shows a little more, you know, a little more current and a little bigger. And who knows, maybe that'll happen someday. No, it would be fantastic. We'll see.
Oh, I like hearing that. This is from Fernando. Hi from Brazil. Met you at WonderCon
Oh,
19. Love your Superman histories focused on Clark. Planet Hulk's my favorite since Sal Buscema and Bill Mantlo. How much more freedom do you have writing a World War? Yeah, by the time you were doing World War Hulk compared to Planet Hulk, how much more freedom did you have from like editorial?
well, it's the other way around because Planet Hulk, we had more freedom because it was just because the
Oh,
Hulk was off planet. And so we didn't have to coordinate with every other office in the entire Marvel, you know, comics universe. With World War Hulk, he's coming back to Earth, and it's a big Marvel event. It was the big summer Marvel event for 2007, and so the Hulk was, you know, he was going to interact with basically every other character in the Marvel universe, and so it took a massive amount of coordination. And so we couldn't just do stuff; we had to make sure that, you know, whatever we were pitching fit all, you know, with all of the other storylines that were going on. It didn't, you know, rip up other people's tracks or step on somebody else's story or, you know, so it, you know, it whole another set of different challenges. You know, like, you know, fundamentally, and you know, so you got to be able to roll with that. You can't be precious about stuff, you know. The way I handled that, just in terms of storytelling, was I knew what the emotional story was, and I had to kind of preserve that at all costs. Hulk's emotional story, but other stuff of who he fights exactly when, you know what I mean, like, you know, like the you know, mechanisms of you know, some of the plot beats and all of that. That's all fungible. That I could all I could, you know, I can switch that around without compromising the emotional story. And that's, and in fact, I, you know, that's being a good collaborator. It's like I'm not gonna be petty and also be you know, a prima donna and stick to whatever, you know, little plot point that I think is really precious at the expense of somebody else's whole book. You know what I mean? I gotta find a way to work with everybody, and make that all work, but at the same time preserving the big emotional story that's at the core of this. And we were able to do that. So
that's interesting because yeah, I forgot with all the Marvel characters, you did have to abide by the law of what those characters'
oh
current
yeah.
status quo are in the current 616 universe. I don't know if it will happen, but I hope Disney Marvel gets better at recognizing you and other writers who wrote the material for the MCU, just like James Gunn is doing or starting to do in his DCU.
Well, thank you.
What are your hopes and maybe even fears of how Scar will be portrayed in the MCU?
Well, I'm not going to talk about my fears. I just hope, you know, it will be cool, and I hope we sell a lot of books as a result.
Okay, good answer. Good answer. What character would you want to do that you haven't yet?
I've been incredibly lucky in that, you know, I've been working in comics 20 years now, and well, almost, yeah, 20 years. Yes, 20 years now, and I've written enough that I've had the chance to write just about all of the kind of Marvel DC characters that were sort of on my list. I mean, I haven't necessarily been able to do deep runs on all of them. I mean, on the DC front, I think Green Arrow is a really fun character someday, maybe. That would be
Uh,
fun. I'd always love to do more Superman. I just love that character. Um, but characters that I haven't done, actually, not Marvel DC, but Peanuts. From time to time, folks do Peanuts characters. I mean, I've got all the complete Peanuts books up on the shelf. You can't
Oh, the
see them here, but
fanographic
yeah,
ones.
yeah.
Those
I
are
mean, I
beautiful.
grew up reading my mom's like little faucet collections of Peanuts, and
Yeah.
I love Peanuts kind of with all my heart, and it would be a lot of fun to play with those characters someday.
Well, from time to time, they do anthologies of
Mhm.
like Peanuts, so that's awesome. That is a very surprising yet amazing answer. I'm also a fan of Peanuts, so I like hearing that. That's awesome. I really dug your John Wick comics in Ronin Island. Magneto Testament is yes, Magneto Testament is really underappreciated
Oh,
as
thank
well.
you.
It's a
Yeah,
solid book.
Testament's one of the books that sort of meant the most to me, and I'm the proudest of having done. Warren Simons had an idea of doing a basically Magneto Year One, which was going to be a story of a kid, German Jewish kid, trying to save his family from the rise of the Nazis and the Holocaust. And he pulled me on board. He knew I had a background in history. I don't think he knew that I'd actually also studied German for years, and but I felt a huge responsibility with that storyline.
Mhm.
Doing anything related to the Holocaust, you really have to do it right. I mean, I had a like 9 foot long bookshelf filled with books, and we really researched the heck out of it and talked to. We had uh, a historical advisor from the Simon Wiesenthal Center who, who looked at everything and helped us out. And Carmine Di Giacomino, Di Giacom. I'm screwing up his last name. I'm sorry.
You're better at it than I am. That's
Uh,
for sure.
he just did Gian Domenico. He did an amazing job as the artist on that book, and I'm really grateful. We no superhero heroics. We really did it as straight historical fiction, but all of the historical facts are factual.
It was a really powerful story. Building on the X-Men classic story by Claremont and
Mhm.
Bolton. Very
Yeah.
he's a very complicated character. I absolutely love Magneto. All right, who's your favorite character in DC? Would it be Superman? You mentioned you were
Yeah. It would be Superman. I mean, I should say City Boy because that's the character that we just Minkyu and I just co-created and did a series of. And I love that character, and I hope we get to do more. But yeah, from back in the day, yeah, Superman Clark Kent's probably my favorite DC.
love it. Sentry versus Banner. Thanks, Mr. Pak. Oh my god, awesome.
I'm so glad that worked for you. Like in the original pitch, it was going to be Thor, but Thor was doing a whole nother storyline and was not available. And they pitched. They said, "Well, let's do the Sentry." And I was like, "Who's a Sentry?" And then I did all the research, and it was like, it actually makes total sense. Like the Sentry and the Hulk actually have a whole relationship, and it. I mean, this is another example of like, I'm not going to fight stuff that can be worked with, you know what I mean? And that could totally be worked with. And we were able to find real emotional resonance there to pull on. And so thank you, Ryan. I'm glad that worked.
And you are getting praise for Lilo and Stitch, by the way.
Oh,
I wanted to show you some of that, but Lilo and Stitch is wonderful. Thanks, Greg,
oh,
for continuing it.
thank you,
It's one of my
Flint.
favorite Disney movies, and
Same. I agree, Richard. Yes.
Lilo and Stitch was fun. It reminded me of the Lilo and Stitch animated series.
Cool.
And James was asking, did you listen to Hawaii Five-O theme song when you were
Yeah.
right?
I have been listening to actually though I was listening to some Hawaiian music. There's I mean I've always we talk about music a lot in this, haven't we? And
I'm all here for it because I love listening while I'm editing. I love listening to music in the background.
yeah, I mean, I was never I never had much talent for music, and I was really uncomfortable singing for many years. But I love music, and it's really important to me. But yeah, I was listening to a lot of Israel, uh, and I hope I'm pronouncing this right. Kamaka Wiwoole, who is one of the legendary Native Hawaiian musicians, singers. You know his music because if you've ever watched the Times Square ball drop, you've heard his version of "Somewhere Over the Rainbow."
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah. So but Doug, I mean, this was
Really pretty,
before.
really pretty.
Yeah, it's amazing stuff. And so I was actually, I mean, I don't think I was listening to that literally while I was writing the scripts, but that's sort of been in the back of my head um, uh, for quite a while now. But yeah.
And here's some amazing questions. Then I know we got to wrap up because you are a busy guy.
Oh,
Who were your biggest inspirations when you were coming up as a writer? Yeah, you mentioned you like reading a lot.
yeah.
There's certain writers that you were like, oh, I like that.
Yeah. Well, I always loved, I mean, probably my, oh, yeah, you know what? I'm going to just reach up and pull it down off my shelf.
Oh,
Right
it became
now.
a show and tell. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. My mom gave me this book, The Stories of Ray Bradbury.
Oh my
Um,
gosh, my
and
wife would love to hear that. I'm a fan of
yeah,
Bradbury too.
1981. I had, I mean, I found Ray Bradbury short stories on my mom's shelf and just loved them. Loved them.
What's your favorite one?
Oh, I mean, The Velt is
The
kind of
Belt. I was saying.
it's,
Yes.
yeah. I remember reading that in 5th grade. It was like actually assigned to us in 5th grade. And it was like
My daughter read it in the 5th grade. So they're still doing that.
it's one of the creepiest, darkest things. You know what I mean? And I thought it was amazing. They, you know, like growing up in Dallas in the 5th grade, we were reading The Velt. You know, I actually
Kids are evil.
I actually did a thing in my Batman Superman book where just as a passing kind of thing, I think Alfred talks about the Velt being young Bruce Wayne's favorite story as a child, that he wanted to have.
Now it's canon. And now it's canon.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's New 52 canon. I don't know if that translates, but yeah.
Okay, touche.
But yeah, Ray Bradbury was always huge for me. I remember at an early age finding out Ray Bradbury was born on August 22nd. I was born on August 23rd, and I was like, yes,
It's a big deal.
yes.
Yeah.
But anyway, but yeah, and I mean, and that kind of, you kind of see that, like the way that short story form having a real emotional hook as well as some wild, sci-fi fantasy idea, like that kind of combination of things really has stuck with me. I reread Dandelion Wine not too long ago, actually after my mom died. That was a book that she really loved. She grew up in Indiana, that's set in Indiana. I remember that was like a book that we kind of bonded over when I was young, and it totally holds up. It's astounding. But yeah, so Ray Bradbury, Kurt Vonnegut was huge for me. Maxine Hong Kingston was huge for me. Like as an Asian American kid, Maxine Hong Kingston's Chinamen, which talks about Chinese immigrants to the United States,
Mhm.
and it was mind blowing. Also, her book Trip Master Monkey, which is a fiction book about a dude, Asian American dude in San Francisco in the, I guess, 1970s, and just like all of his kind of he's a writer, and it's this whole trippy kind of grappling with creative life and changing world and Asian American identity stuff. It's like really blew my mind. I thought it was fantastic. Those are some of the writers who really hit me hard over the years. Shakespeare, Macbeth, King Lear. Those are
You went way back.
Yeah, those blow my mind. Yeah.
And
But yeah.
love how you have the team effort approach. Major props for that awesome attitude.
Oh,
I think it is really important when you're talking about this medium. It is a team effort.
yes, I try to, and I really do try to remember that, and give proper credit all the time. I don't create this stuff; I co-create it.
I did find your work on Superman Batman because of the animated movie Superman Batman Apocalypse and Public Enemies. So those movies made him go and check out your Superman Batman that was happening.
That's cool. Yeah, I think those are based on probably Jeff Loeb storylines. I'm not sure, but then
and I know Public Enemies was the very first one.
Cool.
Apocalypse is a Supergirl story. Yeah. So
cool.
Mr. Pak, big Namor fan. Just want to say thank you for awesome depictions of Namor over the years, from the What If to Hercules to the Marvel Presents stories to Miyamoto.
Oh, hey, you know them all. Thank you very much.
Your name always comes as a Namor ongoing writer amongst fans because you really get the character.
I have a pitch someday, maybe. Yeah, Namor's great. I love Namor. I mean, he's a real fun character. I got to write him in Atlantis Attacks. But yeah, and you mentioned the Marvel Presents story, which was, in a way, it's kind of in the vein of Magneto Testament in that it's a World War II story with these characters. It's Namor dealing with the finding out about Hiroshima and trying to stop Nagasaki. Yeah, I mean, it's a great character, and I really thank you, Carla Verrock. I appreciate that. Namor's great. That would be a character I'd love to do some more with.
Is there a character that you would have loved when you were writing and the idea of World War Hulk came up? Because this is yeah. Is there a character you wanted the Hulk to fight and Marvel was like, well, you can't use that character?
Oh, well, yeah, Thor.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, the Hulk has fought Thor enough times. I I don't need to write a Hulk Thor battle, but it would be fun to write a Hulk Thor battle. I guess I haven't actually. Have I ever done a? No, I've never written a Hulk Thor battle. Someday.
And let's see this one here. Would you consider working on Spectre or Phantom Stranger? Maybe the question.
Oh, that's very interesting. I've never done any of those characters actually at DC. I've written a whole bunch of. Yeah, that particular sort of sphere of DC. I've never kind of dipped into.
These are the obscure characters that
well, yeah, and these are
come
like
and go from time to time.
and these are also the kind of like the trippy sort of noirish characters too, right? Like they're a little less like traditional superhero characters. So I mean, yeah, I like. I think one of the reasons I've got such a eclectic bibliography is because people pitch stuff to me and I'm like, that's pretty interesting. You know what I mean? Like I like variety. So who knows? Maybe.
Okay. And then my last question for today is actually it's kind of a two-parter. We'll start with the first one, which is the obvious one, because I've heard you talk about cosmic and sci-fi stuff. Is there a particular part of Marvel or DC Comics universe that you would love to tackle, whether it's like the Silver Surfer or the Guardians of the Galaxy, or maybe someone like Kirby's Fourth World or the Green Lantern Corps, like something that cosmic and I don't want to put you like in a stereotypical role of a sci-fi and cosmic writer, but I'm curious what out of those characters, what would you love to write, or who would you love to write?
Well, I did have a chance. I did write I think it was a 5-issue Silver Surfer.
You did,
which was a lot of fun. And I've always really liked the Silver Surfer. I used him in Planet Hulk. I used him in the Scar book. So that is one of those characters who, I mean, it's interesting because I feel like, he was amazing as a supporting character in both the Planet Hulk and the Scar book, and I think we did some really fun stuff with him in the little 5-issue Silver Surfer book that I did. But there's more to, I don't know, there's more to be done there. We did a thing where he basically was reverted to a human form, and he had to sort of grapple with life as a he's not human, he's an alien, but grapple with life as as a non superpowered person, which was cool. But I feel like there's there's more to be done there. I mean, obviously there's more to be done. There's lots of great writers and creators who have worked on that character over the years, but I think I could do something cool there. I don't know exactly what that would be just yet, but I think there's something cool to be done there.
So Silver Surfer.
Yeah, I guess that would be the one.
You would love to go back to Silver Surfer. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah,
I mean,
it was the one with Sergio, right? The artist.
Oh no, that was
Segovia?
Yes, Steven Segovia.
Segovia. That's his name. Yeah, sorry, I couldn't remember his last name or first name.
Yeah, Steve's great. Carlo Paglian did the covers on that. This is cosmic adjacent. Not quite. It's not Green Lantern kind of cosmic, but Doctor Strange. Doctor Strange is another character that was always a lot of fun. I mean, he's magic, but magic and cosmic kind of overlap in the Marvel universe.
He's also a surgeon, so there you go. You got all these things that you can add to the character. Yeah, that's great. Love it. And the last question I had, because I love asking this question, especially for somebody like you that obviously has enjoyed the medium for years, is what kind of advice would you give to somebody that's trying to write their own comic story?
Oh, the little nugget of advice I always give is do something short that you can actually finish. I mean, do a one panel comic, do a one panel cartoon, do a 4-panel cartoon strip, a comic strip. Start off that way and just draw it yourself. You know what I mean? Don't worry about tracking down a brilliant artist or whatever. Just do a short comic strip that you can do with your own, whatever level of drawing you've got. You can do something worthwhile, and you can learn the basics of storytelling, visual storytelling. So that's my first advice. And then the next step, like, we all have these huge epics, right? And yes, work on that huge epic, but then work on a 4-page story, work on an 8-page story, and actually finish them. And there's tons of people putting together anthologies, and that's a great way to sort of get your feet wet and get in there. The huge advantage of actually finishing something is that you can get that feeling of what a whole story feels like. And even if you're just doing a 4-page comic, if you finish that 4-page comic and it has a beginning, middle, and end, and it has that little twist and payoff, you've learned something that will apply to whatever you do next. You know what I mean? My example of that is making tons of short films before I ever made my feature film. And, just doing little 2-minute short films taught me so much. And it's far less expensive and time consuming than trying to do your epic from the beginning, So do those short projects, learn from them, leave them behind, keep on moving, and then do the next one and the next one. And that's a way to kind of keep it within reasonable time and budget lengths while also learning as much as possible.
Some great advice. That is some great advice. Thank you for that.
No, thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, everybody, for watching. Thank you to Amy from Dynamite for helping put this together.
Yes.
For getting us connected. I really do appreciate that. Smash that like button. Check out Greg's work. Check out Lilo and Stitch. Was this his current work? Do you have anything else you said you got some things?
Yeah, I've got, I'm writing the Darth Vader book. So,
which is freaking awesome, by
the
way.
Go get that. One of my favorite things I've ever worked on. Yeah. Lilo and Stitch, Darth Vader. What else do I have coming out right now? Oh, the last issue of the Shang-Chi tie-in to the Gang War storyline at Marvel comes out tomorrow on Wednesday. So I did that. And then I've got several kind of exciting things that I can't talk about yet that are in the works, but keep your eyes and ears open, my friends.
Well, I always love seeing your name on projects because it gets me excited because I know it'll be good. So I appreciate it. I'm glad to hear that you got some things coming up. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. And that's it. Have a great night. And a big thank you to Greg for being here and answering all these questions.
Oh, yeah. And if you want to find me, my website is gregpak.com. I'm also on Blue Sky and Mastodon and Threads. You can probably search any one of those things and find me pretty quick.
Mastodon?
Yes, Mastodon. That's